Okay, here's the first of our webinars in support of the 2027 class Design Your Own Fellowships application. Um, we are today's agenda. We're going to be talking a little bit about Equal Justice Works and our mission. We're going to go into an overview of the Design Your Own Fellowships program. Um, Also, why one might be interested in becoming a fellow, and sort of the process of applying to the fellowship, and an overview of the fellowship design itself, and then a little bit more details in how to submit a strong application. So, um, and for the lion's share of this presentation, I'm going to be transitioning over to my colleague, Lauren Hartley. Um, And should have started off with my own introduction. My name is Al Roberts, and I'm Senior Manager of our Recruitment and Enrollment at Equal Justice Works. So recruitment for all of our programs, including this Design Your Own Fellowships class. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lauren.
Great, thanks, Al. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, looks
Yes.
great.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone. Nice to be here with you today. So I'm Lauren Hartley. I'm the Associate Director for Network Engagement here at Equal Justice Works. So I support our Design Your Own Fellows program, as well as our other programs. I also work with our law schools, alumni, all of our stakeholders. And I went to law school myself to be a public interest law attorney and practiced a little bit in immigration law. I also worked at a law school as a public interest advisor, so um, I'm familiar with the process. I like to share that I applied for an Equal Justice Works fellowship myself. When I was going into my 3 year, I didn't get one, but I am still so happy to be here at the organization and supporting the organization and getting to work with so many public interest-minded law students and host organizations and stakeholders. So at Equal Justice Works, our mission is to create opportunities for lawyers to create a lifelong commitment to public service. And we are the country's largest public postgraduate legal fellowship program. We have a little over 200 fellows in the field across several different programs. The Design Your Own Fellowship program, which we'll focus on today, is kind of the signature program and is the largest of those. But we do have a few others as well. Including such as the Rural Summer Legal Corps, which we have law students in right now. They've been getting oriented this week, and they're placed all over the country at different legal services organizations, and will be providing legal services to folks in rural communities. We also run the country's largest hiring fair for law students in the fall, which you may have been a part of. We offer student debt resources. Most law schools are member law schools. And yeah, we have more, at this point, almost 3,000 alumni, many of whom remain in public service after their fellowship. Again, we are going to focus today on the Design Your Own Fellowship program, which is our 2 year fellowship program where every project is a little bit different. I will also briefly mention that we do have things called cohort programs. So that's a group of 6 or 12 or 10 fellows that are working on the same kind of thing. For example, right now we have a cohort of fellows doing opioid response work across the country. And some of those are hiring or hiring soon. So just a note to keep an eye out for that. That's on a rolling basis. And please check those out. So to get into the meat of the Design Your Own Fellowship program, how many fellows do we have? So we just announced our class of 2026 fellows, our most recent class, this Tuesday. So we have 60 fellows that will be joining the field this September in their fellowships, which we're very proud of. It's the same number we had in 2025. Those fellows are about a year into their work right now. And then our class of 2024, which is quite large. And those are the fellows who are finishing up their work. They're in the second year of their project and finishing up this summer. So you can see we have about 120 Equal Justice Works fellows right now. To give you an idea of where our incoming classes, our class of 2026, where are they working? What are they doing? Well, they're all over the country. So they're in 21 different states and Washington, D.C. So you can see in this map, we had a lot of fellows in California, New York, and Washington, D.C. in the class of 2026. But again, they are all over the country. We have fellows from 35 different law schools in our class of 2026. They are at 54 different host organizations. And between them, they have 61 unique sponsors. So it's a really broad, a fairly broad program. Hopefully you've already checked this out, but if you want to see examples of our fellows, you can check out our webpage here. It's called our Meet Our Fellows page. We also sometimes call it the Fellow Archive. And you can search here by these different search bars. So you can look, for example, if you wanted to see if there's been fellows from your law school, you can use that as a search bar. Service location or filter. Service location is by state, so you could look at by state. And you can also check for issue area. So if you're looking for folks that have done, education law, you could look that up as well. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't already done so, to give you an idea of some of the kinds of work that our fellows do. I do want to give you one example as we're kind of starting out. What is an Equal Justice Works Fellowship? You may or may not be super familiar with it. This is an example of a fellow that I worked with here in Washington, D.C., which is where I live. And this fellow, her name is Courtney Bernard. She's finished her fellowship now. She just finished last fall. And she went to Georgetown Law. And she had interned during law school with a medical legal partnership clinic that they have called the Georgetown Health Justice Alliance. And within that Health Justice Alliance, they have something called the P-Law Project, which is the Perinatal Law Project. And so that works with women who are expecting or have recently given birth and are mothering. And DC had a new law that was passed to guarantee paid leave, paid maternal leave for folks. It's pretty new. I believe it was passed in 2021 or 2022. And a lot of people didn't know about it. There are some issues getting the program set up, accessing it, making sure that people were getting access to these benefits. So the Health Justice Alliance P-Law Project and Courtney put together a fellowship proposal and proposed a 2-year project to support the rollout of that law and of those benefits. So she proposed doing direct representation to mothers, that she met in the hospital or in doctor's offices or that were referred to her that needed help accessing these benefits. She trained healthcare professionals on how to identify folks who would be eligible for these benefits. She actually ended up testifying before DC City Council on the law and implementation and related issues a number of different times with written testimony and in-person or video testimony. And then she also helped develop a research tool to analyze common issues in her cases. She was sponsored by, I will say, Merck, so the company that you may be very well familiar with, and Morgan Lewis, which is a major law firm. And her sponsors worked together with her on several pieces of her project doing pro bono. So they had volunteers from Merck who helped them out, helped P-Law out by doing follow-up calls with their clients. So they called them back like 6 months later to see how they were doing. Did they still have issues? Had they gotten the benefits they were supposed to be getting? Were they continuing to get those benefits? And did they have other corollary issues maybe that needed to be addressed? Morgan Lewis helped out on a few research projects as well. So putting all of those pieces together, that was Courtney's 2-year project, and she's been able to stay on there as a staff attorney. So again, that's just one example of our many, many fellows. I encourage you to go back and look at that archive page, and you'll see lots of other examples. Sometimes people say, so why a fellowship? Why would you apply for a fellowship versus just applying for a regular job? So let's talk about it. So some of the benefits of why you might want to apply for a fellowship. You get hands-on experience in an issue area and at an organization of your choosing, right? So some people talk about it as the opportunity to kind of design their dream job right out of law school. It's something you want to do, you want to work on it, and you get to have input on putting that together. We know that the public interest job market is a difficult one, and this is a way to create an entry-level job into the market and into an organization that might not have other funding. You get to participate in learning and networking with other fellows who are working all over the country. Also with our alumni network, again, we have almost 3,000 alumni at this point that are now off leading their own organizations, serving as legal directors at their own organizations. They're law professors, they're clinical professors, they're kind of everything in between. So it's a great network to join. You get to participate in our leadership development program that happens in Washington, D.C. every fall, usually in October, sometimes early November, with all of the other fellows. So it's a really great convening to come together and do some professional development and learning. Our alumni are often involved. It's a great opportunity to network with them. Equal Justice Works also offers loan repayment assistance. So if you become a fellow, you'll be eligible for that. And again, it's an on-ramp to becoming an employee of an organization that you want to work at. So when you become a fellow, the host organization, as we call them, is your employer. And so you have the same employee status as other similarly situated employees would. You get access to benefits, so healthcare, retirement programs, whatever they're offering to other employees, you're getting the same benefits. And you're also getting the benefit of, supervision and training that they're offering to their employees. So when we look at our fellowship, we look at 4 different components. So there's the project, the substance of the project, the candidate. So what the person who's applying, kind of the primary person who's applying, so typically a student or a recent graduate who's applying, the host organization, and the sponsor. And we're going to talk about each of these 4 components. I'm going to go over eligibility for each of these 4 components, kind of basic information for each of them, and then we'll go on from there. So for the candidate, basically, you need to be a graduate of a law school, member law school by September of 2027. So that is when our next class of fellows will begin. We go by the class of 2027 is what we call it. That's when they'll begin. So you need to have graduated with your JD or an LLM by that time and be eligible to work. You cannot have previously been full-time employed as a permanent, public interest attorney position. If you've done something part-time or short-term, that's fine. You can also come from a clerkship or some other programs. We do not have a GPA requirement. We don't ask for a transcript or your class rank at all. So we don't have any sort of academic cutoff. We are really looking for demonstrated commitment to public interest and that you've got the ability to carry out the project that you're proposing. For the project, so the meat of the work that you're proposing to do, it needs to serve an underserved population or address an unmet legal need, right? So there's a gap. There's some kind of service, there's some sort of need that is not being met, and your project is going to help meet that need. We want to see that it does need to be distinct from, a staff attorney position. So that's what we say. We say that it needs to be innovative. It's not an existing position, right? So you're proposing to do something new, and it needs to be discrete. That is hopefully going to have impact on that community and that organization. It can be a combination. People will ask, well, what should my project be? What kinds of work should I be proposing? It can be a combination. Most of them are. Direct representation is most commonly the anchor of most of our projects. So you're doing, 60% of your time doing direct representation, and then maybe you're doing a little bit of community outreach, or maybe you're doing a little bit of, know your rights materials, know your rights presentations and information, or there's a research component. We do have some projects that focus on impact litigation, and that's the bulk of the project. It's a smaller number of projects in our class, but we have some of them every year. The other note is the project can be standard criminal defense or international law. So if there's representation that would otherwise be provided by a public defender, that would not be eligible for this type of work. There are some holistic defender offices that host projects before. So, for example, Bronx Defenders in New York is a regular fellowship host, and they host fellows who are doing work that is related to criminal defense, but is not itself criminal defense. And we can clarify that if you've got any questions around that. So again, needs to be distinct from a staff attorney position. piloting some sort of new, legal service or new type of, service or or serving a new community. We also look for projects that are ambitious, but feasible, because you've only got 2 years. So what can you accomplish, in those 2 years? Host organizations. So who your host organization might be, if you are a host organization, if you're a legal services organization and you're looking to host a fellow, how do you qualify? So you do need to be a nonprofit, so a 501c3 or a 501c4 with legal staff, capable of providing benefits, health insurance. If you're working in the office, they need an office space. If everyone gets to work remote, then that's fine. Or it can be hybrid. Whatever your other employees are doing, that's what the candidate needs to be able to do. The host organization does need to be able to support and supervise new attorneys. We recommend that the organization, if it's very small, has no less than 2 attorneys who are dedicated to providing legal services. That's so that you're adequately able to support and supervise new attorneys. It does need to be based in the US or its territories as well. Supervisors need to have experience in the project area or be able to find it. We also, want to make sure the project aligns with the strategic vision and mission of the organization, and that there's a fit there. And then I think I saw a question about law school clinics. So a law school clinic can be a host if it is an independent 501c3 or 501c4. So this is kind of a tax status question when it comes down to it, implication. So you would check with them about their status, but they are sometimes able to be hosts. And then the fourth component, sponsors. So the sponsors is sort of the unique project component for Equal Justice Works versus, I know, some other fellowship programs out there that may just have one sponsoring organization or kind of one place that's hosting. For Equal Justice Works, each of our fellows is supported by a different group of sponsors. So it might be one sponsor, or it might be 2 organizations that work together. They are the ultimate audience for this application. They're most commonly law firms and corporations. So like, as I mentioned before, the fellow who was sponsored by Merck and Morgan Lewis. So Morgan Lewis is a firm that does work for Merck. It's one of, they're a client. And so they're partnering together and hopefully doing some pro bono together, or having the fellow in for presentations that they're doing together. Some of our sponsors are also private foundations, family foundations, and private individuals. So sponsors are engaged throughout the whole process. So they are involved in the interviews typically. When it gets to interview stages, they're in the interview, they're on the panel, leading the panel very often. And then throughout the 2 years of the fellowship, you're checking in periodically, meeting together, maybe doing pro bono together, hearing presentations, or some of our, private donors might be taking their fellow to lunch, that kind of thing. So the sponsor does provide the financial support that ultimately goes to the host organization to help pay the salary and benefits, but they're also engaging otherwise and hearing what you're doing and interacting with you in other ways. We do have sponsor preferences that we'll be publishing a little bit later in the cycle. Our sponsors often have an issue area or geographic priority. So for example, like New York City, or maybe they want to see projects in disability law and veterans law in Los Angeles and Chicago and Houston. That might be a set of preferences. So we do try to publish those as we have them. I would say that is not an exhaustive list. So it is just some of the preferences that are known to us during the summer when the application is still open. And so we say, yes, look at that list. You can refer to that list, and that can be a factor in you developing your project, but please do not rely on it at all as an exclusive list. If you have a great project design, or you think is a great project, a really strong candidate, you can please apply. So there are projects that are selected every year, that weren't on that initial sponsor list because the sponsor comes in later or realizes that it's a really strong project and something they really want to fund. So again, the sponsor preferences, when we publish them, they're a reference point, but by no means an exhaustive list. Any other questions about those key components before we go further?
I did just want to know a couple of questions in our Q&A portion here. One of them, the first one is really sort of a more general question, but an anonymous writer asked how best to build a project, especially as an organization is likely to know more about what they need than we as an applicant would, and how to discern those needs for building a strong project proposal. Just sort of what's sort of the first step there?
Yeah. So I think these are I'm looking at the Q&A now, look like project design questions. So I am going to get into that next. I just want to make sure I answered any sort of eligibility questions. I did see a question here. What do you mean we say about it should be discrete? So it should be discrete, discrete, discrete as in separate, like different from a staff attorney position. We don't mean discrete as in like not talking about it. I mean discrete as in separate is what that means. And then I see some other questions. Yes, expenses to the host organization. So host organization, we provide a supporting payment to if you are the host organization that you're able to use to support the fellow, so salary and fringe. And that is up to you to use however you would like. And you can see more information about that in our host org guide, which is on our website. And then there was a question about graduating as an LLM. So we do require that applicants have work authorization for the 2 years that they're proposing to be a fellow. So unfortunately, most F1 students are not going to have that eligibility for 2 years because you do need to have it for, September 2027 is when the fellowship term would start, and it would run for 24 months after that. So September 2027 to August of 2029. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the project design questions for now, and I think that'll answer some of the other questions I'm seeing in the chat too, and then we'll answer more Q&A as we go on. Okay, so project design. So how do you go about this? So our application development, I think you can think about it, in these sort of stages. The candidate, again, those 4 components are all coming together. So in the project design stage, this is when what the candidate and the host organization are really working together to develop the project and put together the proposal that's going to be submitted in September. So the application is open now. It's due in September. So you have several months to be working on it. So what do you start with? You want to start with conceptualizing what the project is going to be. So if you are a candidate, so maybe you're a current law student, maybe that's thinking about what are the things that I'm interested in doing, what's my background, what do I have experience in so far, and what are the kinds of things that I might like to work on. Do I want to work in special education law? Do I want to work with senior citizens and elder care issues? Do I want to work on healthcare issues? For a host organization, maybe it's a gap you're looking to fill. So and for candidates as well. So very often I say that a great place to develop a project is, if you're at a legal services org and kind of standing around going like, we'd really love to provide this one service, but we haven't been able to do it yet. Or I'd love to serve this community over here, but we just haven't been able to do that yet. Or I'm seeing a lot of clients with this particular need, and we don't provide that here. We'd love to be able to provide that. That is a great place to start thinking about whether or not it would be, ripe for a fellowship proposal. You can see on our website, the application is open, so you'll be able to see all the parts of it. You'll also see a blank or like a sample on the website. And so you can look at what these questions are going to be. And I encourage you to then, look at those questions and then spend some time designing the project. So I think you want to make sure you're getting input from the relevant communities that you want to serve. Looking at, again, what's that gap? What's the need that you're going to meet that's not currently being met? What are the kind of other organizations that are working in this space? Allied organizations? Is there, coalitions that you're a part of that are working in this space that might be relevant? And how is what you want to do, filling a gap and meeting an unmet need? This very often is where, this is where candidates and host organizations should really hopefully be talking to each other. And I'm going to talk in a minute on how you might pair up. So you're looking at ideas, you're starting to design a project, and then you're going to be refining and reviewing that project. So I'll talk about having a committee that's put together that's kind of helping you review your proposals before you get them ready to submit. Again, so you can check out our fellow archive for examples of projects. Some things to think about, the expertise and mission of the host organization. What's the scope and scale of kind of the work that they're currently doing? What's the potential impact of the project? Again, candidate background, experience, and skill sets. Resilience of the project and host organization. So right now, things are changing a lot in the political climate, right? And law is changing very quickly. So you might think twice about designing a project that is very specifically tied to one particular law or one particular provision of federal law, right? Unfortunately, we've seen in recent years that there might be, a quick executive order that overturns a large section of law. And then you're trying to design a 2-year project. So what does that look like for that project? Funding for the same reason. So we had a few organizations in the past year or two that lost big chunks of their funding and then were no longer able to host a fellow. So is the organization in a place where they're kind of resilient enough to be able to host a fellow? And you also have to, again, consider the audience. So the ultimate audience for the application are our sponsors. So again, law firms, corporate legal departments, foundations, individual donors. So be keeping that in mind when you're developing the projects and when you're writing the projects as well. People say, well, what should we apply in? What should my project be on? So I can tell you some of the most common issue areas we've had for this past cycle in the class of 2026. 6 of our projects in this class have affordable housing as their primary issue area. It's a very high need in lots of areas of the country right now, as is criminal justice reform. So another top area of need. 4 of the fellows had education and special education, disability rights in children and youth as one of their top 3. Also, of course, a lot of those are overlapping, right? A lot of these are intersectional with projects. These are just the primary issue areas. So there's secondary issue areas and other things that they're covering as well. And then we had 3 that were a healthcare medical legal partnership, did veterans work, prisoners' rights projects, and domestic violence projects. So, a range of different types of work in the class of 2026. So I'll talk about pairing up, so how candidates and host organizations perhaps find each other or come together and then work together to develop a fellowship proposal. There's a few different ways to think about this. So a great place to start is existing networks. So if you are a student looking for a host organization, there could be, places that you've interned or worked during your time in law school or before. If you are a host organization, if you've had interns, hopefully that's a great place to start. Local law schools are a place to start. So same way. So local host organization, local law schools, depending on, sometimes it depends on size or, excuse me, location, right? So you might also be looking, if you're a law student, advisors. So talking to your career center for sure. If you've got a public interest advisor or public interest law center, that's a great place to go. They often know what they're talking about. Professors can be helpful. So again, so maybe academic professors or clinical professors, experiential professors. If your school has anyone who's directing pro bono projects at the school, they're a great place to start and get recommendations. I advise everyone check out psjd.org. So if you are a law student who's a member of NAP, which most law schools are, you have free access to psjd.org. If you're a host organization out there, most of you still have access to this as well. I occasionally log in and check out my old account. You still get access to. psjd.org is Public Service Job Directory. .org. So this is a place a lot of public interest employers can post a call to host a fellow. So if you're a host organization, consider posting there. If you're a student, definitely check it out. There are some that are listed there now. Same thing with idealist.org. There's fewer on there, but there's some as well. And websites. So if you're looking at a legal services organization, look at their hiring website, and maybe they have a post there. Also, if you're a host organization, also consider other job boards. So if there's bar associations that you're affiliated with, LinkedIn, possibly if you're using that. Some schools have active, Facebook hiring groups. So it really depends on where you find kind of your pool of potential employees or fellows and what works for you. The job posting will hopefully include basics about the organization and sort of what they're looking for. So if you go on psjd.org right now, you'll probably see a few postings there. Say maybe there's one for like the Education Law Center, and they'll say, we're looking for candidates who are wanting to design a project in these kind of 3 areas. And they might ask you to give them a resume and maybe a couple paragraphs on the kinds of thing you're interested in, and you can apply that way. And so that's a great way to start, getting matched up and start having conversations and making a plan for how you want to develop these projects together. Questions you all should be asking each other. So remember, you're going to be in an employer-employee relationship for 2 years of the fellowship. So making sure there's fit for the project and general work culture. So you want to make sure you're discussing, what are hours, what's office culture like, are we in office, is it virtual, is it hybrid, is there time in court for this particular project, or is it mostly, in office, or is it doing other things? Again, employer-employee relationship. So you're also setting pay, salary is set between the 2 of you. So you want to talk about that. Benefits, raises. If there's a union at the organization, that's definitely something to talk about. That often ties into things like leave, supervision and structure. So there should be always a primary supervisor and a secondary supervisor lined up. How large is the organization? What does that look like? What unit is supervision going to be housed in? Who's going to be taking that on? And what's the other kind of support for the project? If you've had fellows before, or if the organization has had fellows before, getting an idea of whether or not those folks have stayed on is great, or if the work has been continued, even if they haven't stayed on. Does that work remain part of what the organization does now? Has it shifted? What does it look like? What does that look like generally? And this is a great time, if you've known fellowship alumni who have done this type of work, it's a great time to reach out to them. Definitely, if you're a student, be reaching out to your law school, career center. Are there any alumni that you're not yet connected with that you could get connected with, and talk to them about the organization or their project? I will stop there. Any questions about the initial stages of coming up with a project idea and getting matched up? I see there's a question. Going back to eligibility, School-based fellowship for 26 to 20, 1 year should be fine. Yeah. That was an eligibility question. Any other questions about organizations? So for international students, yeah. So I will say typically international students are not able to complete our fellowship program because you do need 2 years of work authorization guaranteed. And unfortunately, most international students are not able to guarantee that when they're submitting an application. So it's typically not a good fit for that program, unfortunately. I am going to go on to what tips for submitting a strong application, and then we'll circle back to some of the really specific questions later on. I want to make sure everyone gets like the general information. So some tips for submitting a strong application. So
Sorry, Lauren, you switched on to mute.
sorry, yes. So assembling a team. So whether you're a host organization or you're a candidate that's thinking about applying, think about a team that is going to help you develop and review this proposal. So this team should definitely include representatives from the host organization, so the proposed supervisor and relevant leadership, whoever's involved in developing the application, like the legal director. The executive director is also going to have to sign off on this proposal when it comes time. So you want to make sure that they're being consulted at least. If the organization has a pro bono coordinator, that is a key person to loop in. So they're very often working with law firms and corporate legal departments that are our current or potential sponsors. And pro bono is a part of the project that we ask you to propose. So make sure you're looping that person in early. On the law school side, so make sure you're looping in your law school advisors. So this is your career services office. If you've got someone who has public interest expertise in that office, definitely be looping them in, chatting with them early, now and getting their input. And if you've got a public interest or pro bono center or pro bono director, another great person to be sure you're looping in. Other folks that can be helpful in reviewing your proposal to making sure it's strong can be faculty members. So they could be academic faculty or experiential faculty. So like externship or internship instructors who really know what it's like for students and new attorneys to be doing this work on a day-to-day basis and supervising folks and putting together an application. You can also think about alumni and mentors. So it can be Equal Justice Works alumni to the extent you're aware of them, if they're from your law school or they work at your proposed host organization, they're a great resource. You can also look at other project-based fellows. So the Skadden Fellowships follow a similar 2-year design and are each very unique. So those alumni often have insight as well. Many folks are applying to both programs with the same project proposal. And again, just practitioners in the field and folks at related organizations. So if there's an organization that your proposed host works really closely with, maybe you're going to be getting referrals from, or they're a partner for the work that you want to do. You want to make sure that you're getting your input and doing that early in the summer so that there's time to get feedback and review the application. So the application is completed entirely online. We use a platform called Submittable that is now live. So Al was saying, I recommend you create an account now and you answer some preliminary questions, and then you'll be able to see the rest of the application so you can be familiar with the content. The host organization and the candidate work together to create one joint application. So the candidate is the primary applicant and the primary submitter, but there is information that we ask the host organization to submit. So they're going to be contributing to that as well. So you want to make sure that there's time for everyone to review and see what information is needed and get that in a timely manner. Here on this page, you can see kind of the basic parts of the application, which I won't go into every single one of them because they're also available in Submittable and they'll be on our website. But just noting that in the proposal narrative, that's when you're telling us the most about what the project is going to be. This is like the meat of what the project is, what your goals are, how you're going to accomplish it, and the potential sponsor and pro bono engagement opportunities are really important there. You also will need 2 letters of recommendation. So if you're planning to apply, make sure that you're building in time to get those submitted in advance of the deadline. Some more tips on writing a competitive application. So this is different than a standard job application. It's kind of a combination of a grant proposal and a business plan, right? So it's not just a standard cover letter resume. There's all of these other information that you're thinking out and showing that you're really approaching thoughtfully about how you're going to meet this need and how you're going to serve, this client population. As I said, you want to build a review team to have people helping develop and review the application. You really want to focus on fit. So we kind of say, like, why this proposal, why at this host organization, why now? This is all the kinds of things you want to be making sure you're highlighting within the application. As I said before, the ultimate audience for the application is the sponsors. They're the ones that are ultimately selecting the fellow and choosing who they want to support and what kind of work they want to support. So that's something to be mindful of. Again, law firms, legal departments, corporations, foundations, and private donors. Our sponsors are national, and yeah, again, so they're national, they're all over the country. So one thing I think to be mindful of this cycle right now is, there's been changes in laws in many states around language that's considered DEI. Right? So there's certain language that if you include in a proposal might mean that that sponsor is not able to consider it. So that's something really to be mindful of. So to give you an example, so I live here in Washington, D.C., as I noted before. So an application, 3, 4, 5 years ago might have said, we're going to serve Black low-income residents of wards 7 and 8 in Southeast DC. Those are areas of Washington, D.C. that are predominantly low-income communities of color. But right now, if you use that language in an application, it might mean that sponsors in some other states or nationally that are sensitive to working nationally might not be able to consider that application. So how could you phrase it differently? You could just say, this project is going to be supporting low-income residents of Ward 7 and 8 in Southeast DC. So there's different ways to talk about serving the communities that you want to be serving. So just be mindful of that national audience that you're writing for. We will have application resources on our website. So again, there'll be a blank one that will be posted and there's a host org guide, there's a candidate guide. Please check those out on the website. There's a supplemental FAQ. We have a 1-pager on public interest and pro bono, on pro bono engagement opportunities. Lots of additional resources on the website. So please make sure you're looking at those. Most common application mishaps. So projects that are overambitious or unrealistic. This is 2 years for a new attorney to be achieving. I remember a couple years ago, I had an application from a very passionate individual that was essentially like, I'm going to fix asylum law by suing in the First Circuit in 2 years. And, unfortunately, that was just not a very realistic application. So we knew that wasn't going to, it was overly ambitious. Other mishaps, not paying attention to the prompts and questions that you're being asked for, making your, explaining the impact of your project, why it's a little bit different. Making sure you're including pro bono opportunities and engagement. That's a really important piece for many of our sponsors is important. You want to make sure that your personal statement makes sense. So like why a fellowship. And you of course want to make sure there's no typos or grammatical errors. A lot of the people who will be reviewing the application are lawyers and very attuned to typos. So make sure you are careful of those. Okay, so really quick, what is next? Our application is open today. So on our webpage, this is the application webpage, and you will see a lot of the resources here. So make sure you're looking at this. Applications are due September 17th, so you have several months to prepare for them. Um, uh, and after that deadline, here's what happens after that. So our alumni review the fellowship application and give us some qualitative feedback on the applications. And then in November, we start putting together what we call slates of candidates. And we would say that's maybe 8 to 10 applications. We then send on to the sponsors, and the sponsors will say, great, we want to interview these 4. And then we start the interview process. So candidates will be interviewing with sponsors and being selected. That happens into the spring, somewhat on a rolling basis as sponsors are coming in, as they're committing, and as we're getting those interviews scheduled. The process will close in May. The class will be announced with our announcement day. Fellows might take the bar exam, and then in September, fellows begin their work and then have a 2-year term. So that is the big picture. So what should you be doing now? Again, the deadline is September 17th. If you're interested in applying, you want to create an account in Submittable, enter that basic info, review what you might be doing for a project. You want to continue to do that throughout the summer. Later on in the summer, when it's a bit closer to the deadline, you're going to be making sure that you're requesting your letters of recommendation, getting that review team involved, you've updated your resume, you've updated your personal statement, and make a plan for your final review and submission. And questions. Al, I will let you feed me some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying I've been answering some via text as well, so please feel welcome to check the Q&A section of your Zoom interface to reference those. Just responding to one real quick. It sounds like it's from a potential host organization, but they ask if the host organization should have a separate login to fill out portions of the application, or should they use the candidate's login. And I do want to take this moment as an opportunity to sort of flag with the submittable application portal. There's a collaborator feature. So once a candidate begins an application, they're able to invite others externally into the application to contribute. So we advise you that you use that feature preferably instead of a candidate's login information. And let's see here. Just going back up to near the top. A question of whether we should expect a similar class size this upcoming cycle. I know that for the past 2 cycles, we've had a class of 60 fellows.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we don't know exactly. We would like to have a class of 60 fellows, and we're aiming, that is our hope and our goal that we're working towards. So I will say at the same time as you all are putting together the applications, we're also going out and getting commitments from sponsors as well. So that is happening starting this week, and we'll go on into the cycle. So we are working on it, and hope it will be at least 60 fellows, but no guarantees.
Absolutely. One is we have an eligibility related question. The individual says that they saw the applicants must be recent graduates. Does this recent mean within the last 5 years, 10? Am I eligible to participate if I'm currently working at a nonprofit but not as a public interest lawyer?
I think that's maybe one you can email us about, because typically our eligibility is if you've been a full-time, attorney role, then you would not be eligible. But if you've not been an attorney, if you're going to law school on the side, but you haven't been an attorney yet, then you're still eligible. But if you're still unclear, let us know.
That's right. Yeah,
Um,
I dropped in the
yeah.
chat a link to our applicant guide, which answers a lot of these eligibility questions. So please refer to there, as well as our main landing page. We have an FAQ document that gets into a little bit more detail about eligibility.
Yeah. I see a couple questions I wanted to answer around like sponsor preferences. So there's a question about national audience and immigration legal services. So yeah, it's a good question. Immigration certainly is. We had a few projects in the last cycle that were funded in the immigration space. As you can imagine, with 61 different sponsors, there's a lot of different attitudes towards whether or not they want to do immigration work and what kinds of immigration work they want to do, and attitudes towards risk and what that might expose them to. Around that, I think for immigration, we also know many law firms continue to do immigration work. They continue to do pro bono work. They have for a long time, and they're still doing it. They're maybe just not putting it on their website, but they're still doing it. So I think that there's another question here that asked about if you work with firms that already provide pro bono services. So that's a good question, Kelly. So if you look at our website, you can if you look at the Meet Our Fellows page, you can filter by sponsor. So if there's a certain law firm that you want to look up and see if they sponsored fellows, just search for them on that page. Also, if you are looking at doing any type of project you're doing, we ask you to talk about your existing pro bono partnerships. So that's a great place to mention firms that you already work with. So if you already have a relationship, that's great. Definitely try to include that. There's a couple questions where you could include that information, but like definitely get that information in there. That's super helpful for us to have and for them to see as well, because sponsors want to know that they're supporting a project that's going to work and work for 2 years. And so if they already have a relationship with the organization in some way, it's nice to highlight that. Another question about project proposal does it need to be completed in 2 years? So yeah, so something needs to be done in 2 years, right? So it might be that you're piloting a new type of work, or that you're setting up a clinic to address XYZ need. It might not be that you're going to keep doing that, but you are starting it within 2 years. So that's commonly, most often what we see. That also means the host organization can then take that, data from that fellowship and then go out and see if it can be incorporated into the work of the organization long term, as long as it's working. Hopefully it is, right? So that means that they can go out to other funders and say, hey, look, we have this proof that this project works. Like, will you give us money to keep funding it, for example? Or just convincing an organization's board, right? Like, we're trying this pilot program and now we want to make it part of our regular work. And then maybe the board of the organization goes, great, that works so well. Let's keep doing that. So those are ways to think about the timing.
I just wanted, we do have one individual in the chat with their hand raised. I'm going to give them opportunity just to speak up. So Emma Daughtry, I'm gonna go ahead and allow you to speak if you can come off mute. Emma, I think we have you. No worries, Emma. If you need to collect your thoughts, Lauren, if you had another question in the chat to get to.
Yeah, so there was a question about submitting earlier. Is that an advantage? No, submitting earlier than the deadline is not an advantage. We don't start review of anything until after the deadline. So no need to rush. Please take the time to submit a strong application.
That's right. And just for a point of clarification there, well, we will have the ability to review applications. We won't actually conduct the review and scoring and sort of evaluation of the application until after all applications have been received and the application is closed.
Yeah. Two questions that I think are related, or I think of as related. So one is Equal Justice Works and sponsors looking for projects that are unlike anything we've ever funded before, or will an application be funded if it's competitive, even if it has similarities? So yeah, we are not looking for people to reinvent the wheel or do something like that's never been done before, because we recognize that's very hard. We say that it needs to be, when we say innovative, that means it needs to meet a need that is not currently being met outside of a regular staff attorney role, uh, or serve a client population that is not currently being served. So for your organization, it might be a client base that they've never worked with or a service that they've never provided. Right? There might be other organizations in other cities or even in your city that provide a similar service. You do need to make the case as to why the work is distinguishable. On a related note, so there was a question about immigration work. So our fellowship, the Design Your Own Fellowship, is not designed to replace a staff attorney. So like an immigration staff attorney role is not appropriate for an Equal Justice Works fellowship. It does need to be unique and distinguishable from a staff attorney role. If you are at an immigration legal services nonprofit, I know everyone needs more staff attorneys. And if I had the staff attorney magic wand, I would definitely wave it for you. But unfortunately, I don't. So one way to think about a fellowship is maybe, is there related types of work, or is there a piece of work that a fellow could do that would free up your staff attorneys to do other types of things? So that's a way to think about that.
Mhm.
I see a question about, are we able to run proposed projects by EJW staff? We're not, just due to volume concerns and also equity concerns, we're not really able to do like individual meetings with everyone. You are free to reach out to the fellowships inbox with questions. We also are going to be having some office hours later in the summer that you can attend to ask that, to get some general advice on questions. Al, there's any other questions? There's a question about finding the submittable link, I think.
Yes, of course. So the submittable link is live on our website, and I'm going to be dropping in the chat just again. I've dropped it a few times, but a link to our primary landing page for the Design Your Own Fellowships program, and you'll be able to find really everything that we've referenced here today on that page in terms of applicant guide, host organization guide, the link to the application itself through submittable, as well as other future webinar opportunities. We'll be having a series of additional webinars. Right now we have one scheduled for June 6th, but we'll have some additional opportunities in the future, so more to come there. And apologies, I think, we definitely answered most of these questions, but
Yeah, and I know we're at time, so we'll say thank you so much, and please feel free to reach out to the inbox if there's additional questions, and check out all of the resources on our webpage.
that's right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all so much. Take care.